Hey guys, it's Emily Schaller, and you're watching the RoxyF Boltcast. Before we get started, there's a few things we need to go over. First off, nothing on this podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice should only come from your doctor. Views expressed on this podcast are solely opinions of the guest and not necessarily opinions of myself or the RoxyF Foundation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the RoxyF Boltcast.
This episode of the RoxyF Boltcast is sponsored by...
I am Alex Ashby. I am 34 years old, living with cystic fibrosis. I am originally from Illinois, but I live in Cape Coral, Florida for the last 20-some years. I grew up here, and my son has cystic fibrosis.
You're 34 years old. Do you want to go through your diagnosis story, when you were diagnosed, what led you to be tested, and kind of maybe your early years with CF?
Yeah, so I was actually diagnosed when I was 6 months old. I was very sick by the time that they had figured out what was going on. So I was already getting, tube feedings, and I was already underweight, and my parents just had no idea because there was no family history of it ever, like on either side. So once I was diagnosed, things got better. The whole shebang started, enzymes, treatments, everything.
Were you active as a kid? Sports?
Yes, I was. I would say like in middle school, I started to get more active. I played softball, and then high school came around and I swam and I ran. Like, I found running to help me mentally, even at a younger age. Like, I found it, like one day I was just really upset and like I had to get out of the house, and I'm like, what do I do? And I literally went for a run, and literally it's just, I lean on it so heavily to this day.
When did you decide that you wanted to be a mother? And then what was that process like? Like, I know you work in college, you meet Tay-Tay. Like, give us that timeline. Yeah,
so I know there's moms out there who are like, oh my God, I've always wanted to be a mom. Like, that's my one. I knew it from when I was little, and I'm just like, cool, not me. And then I met Taylor. When I met him and his family, I kind of fell in love with him and them. And that's when I was like, I want a child. And it was hard because cystic fibrosis, right? Like, not all of us can easily have a child on our own. So we tried for a good year and a half, nothing.
The thought for me of bringing a kid into this world when I didn't know if I was going to be around was kind of scary. Did you have any of those thoughts, and how did you work through it? And then how was the journey to finally getting pregnant? Like, what did you guys go through?
100% had those thoughts. So basically, after nothing was happening for over a year, I went and saw my doctor, and I had this procedure done, and a week later I was pregnant. And I think if I would have said, okay, you know what? It might happen. It might happen because you're a carrier and I have CF. And let's talk about a scenario if it does happen. Let's figure out how we would get through it. Postpartum would have been a whole different ballgame if I had prepared myself.
Walk us through Landon's diagnosis and how you guys got the news, and then kind of how you handled it.
I continued to work, I continued to teach until about late September. I stayed home from work from then on, and Landon was born at 37 weeks because I just went to the doctor that day, and because I had to go to a high risk OB, and I'm like, I literally can't breathe. they're like, okay, let's induce ya. So I was induced that night. I had to have an emergency C-section, was not planning that. Like, I thought, I'm gonna get induced and I'm gonna push and I'm gonna be around my family, and absolutely not. Pushed out by family, surgery right now. Landon came out, he was not breathing. So I was waiting to hear a cry, something, and I'm like, I don't hear anything. So they just put him next to my face for maybe 10 seconds, and then that was it. So he was in the NICU for about a week. So the only reason that we found out he has cystic fibrosis is because they're like, well, based on your history, we need to test him. Then that news came and my world fell apart. I never even knew about postpartum depression, to be honest with you. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, I was like, oh, you have babies and it's like great and joyous and like, yay, you know, like I did not know that there was anything like this. And I went through hell and back. I took care of our son, but that was all I took care of. I was Baker acted twice. I was in a psychiatric ward, a locked ward for 17 days. I underwent electric shock therapy for 2.5 months. During this time, I lost a very close friend to cystic fibrosis. And I knew that she had passed from a bacteria that I had just cultured. I was scared. I was like, wow, so am I gonna die? You know what I mean? Like it was so many things. It was so many things that just went wrong. And there's not resources. There's just not enough out there, you know? And I had always said, I wanna like do something about that too. Like help moms with this. And so they know they're not alone. And there's so many moms who have struggled and who haven't made it, you know? Yeah. Or moms that maybe struggle in silence.
Your story alone, like this alone, hopefully will help a lot of people, CF people, moms, anybody, right? Like you went through a lot.
Some powerful shit.
It's some powerful shit.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody with CF who wants to start a family?
Oh, obviously get your partner the genetic testing done and really even dig into it with like a genetic counselor and like really go over the scenarios of if it did happen. And obviously give yourself a ton of grace. And, you know, look out for yourself too. Because if you don't, then, you know, things could just go sideways real quick. Because you have to be well to take care of your baby well, right? So you've got to make that time for you too. So I think on Mother's Day, I reflect on the fact that I am really strong. And that although my path to motherhood was extremely rocky, rough terrain, I don't regret it one single freaking bit. Like I would go through it 100 times to have my son, 100 times. I'm so thankful. And I think that's what I think about a Mother's Day is like, I'm just so thankful and grateful that I have him and he's a miracle and that we have each other.